meeting to order because it's 6:30 and we want to be timely. So I just want to announce that as required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Assuming nobody is doing that, would you please all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Is there anyone for weekly briefing?
Hi, can we just play last week? I'm just here to remind you that tomorrow is the Safe Halloween at the Community Center from 4:30 until we're all trick-or-treated out. And then the last thing I want to remind everyone is, I know it's early, but if you have an opportunity and can drop by some things for the soldiers in the box, Cape Cod supports our troops. That is in the front of the lobby, and that has to be in by November 14th, so it's coming fast. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else for weekly briefing? No? Okay. Public comments and announcements. We're going to accept the proceeds from the Irish Pub road race for the Harwich Fire Department.
Hello. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Is it Madam Chairman? Is that how we do it right?
I suppose so.
Madam Chair? Have to watch out what I say. Members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brendan O'Reilly. I'm from the Irish Pub in West Harwich, and I'm here to present our contribution this year to the Harwich Ambulance Fund from the Irish Pub Road Race. And I'm glad to say that once again, it went off very, very safely with the help of both fire and police, and we're glad. And it was pretty successful. So we're going to do it again, I think. Something keep myself together, like, you know. So anyway, I'd like to thank you very much also for the permit for the road race, and that's in the process again for next year. So without much ado, I will present a check for $500 to Deputy. Sir. Thank you, brother. Deputy Dave. Thank you.
Just like to say, Brendan and I actually go way back. I worked there long before I worked for the Harwich Fire, and he's a true partner of the community, and this is just an example of somebody that's been around as a fixture of the community, and we appreciate the support from the road race and what it means to this community. So
That's great. Thank you very much.
Remind me, how many years in a row has this been?
Well, I just was thinking about that, and it happens to be 39 went by, and because I was surprised when I looked at the calendar and said, 40? I'm not that old. What happened? Well, anyways, it all went by pretty quick.
I must have been just
Went by pretty quick, so I guess next year is 40, and I'm not sure if we were thinking about we can do something extra. I don't know, but it's 40. I've been there for 28 of those.
Yeah, no, thank you much.
What did I do wrong? All right.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.
Appreciate
All
it. Okay. Is anybody else for public comments, announcements? No? Can we get a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the following consent items. Approve the minutes October 16, 2017 regular session. Approve the application for the Irish Pub Road Race for August 4, 2014. 18. I got 40 in my mind. It'll be 40, so we will expect some special flags or flowers or something, I'm sure. Vote to re-sign Ginger Plum Lane betterment for recording. I guess, Chris, we found in there was a slight typo that we just
Yeah, there was an inversion of two numbers, so we're $890 off, so we're just correcting that.
Just correct that. Approve appointments for Karen Young, Cemetery Commission as a full member. Term expired June 30th, 2019. Appointment of Stan Pasterzak, Conservation Commission full member. It's not stated in the agenda, but in the packet it's stated for 2020. Water Digs Conservation Commission Associate term to expire June 30th, 2020. Noreen Donahue, Wastewater Support Committee to expire June 30th, 2020. And Sharon Flusser, Wastewater Support Committee term to expire June 30, 2020.
Second. Okay, so we've got a second. Can we get a,
Whole bunch of them.
move ahead, get a vote?
Aye.
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 Unanimous. Okay, public hearings and presentations. We have the Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance to speak to us about support for midwater trawl buffer zone.
Hi, my name is Amanda Kusar. I'm here from the Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance, which is just a couple miles down the road. Different town, though. Normally, I make these presentations with my colleague Seth Rolbein, who many of you might know. Unfortunately, he has not quite adjusted to walking in his new boot yet. Hurt his foot earlier this week, so you get me. So the reason we're here tonight is to talk about herring, and many of you are familiar with river herring, thanks to the herring river here in Harwich. But what you might not know is that herring have a cousin. It's the ocean herring. And the ocean herring are also a forage species very similar to the river herring, except that they don't spawn in fresh water. Ocean herring are targeted by vessels called midwater trawls, which operate in pairs, and they tow football field-sized nets behind them, which essentially capture everything in their path, including river herring. So when river herring are out at sea, they mingle with ocean herring, living in big schooling balls. And so when these giant nets catch everything, they leave nothing in their path and disrupt the whole balance of the ecosystem. And they leave nothing for other fish like cod or bluefin tuna to feed on. And it severely depletes the inshore fisheries. And it's almost ironic, given that all the towns and conservation trusts around here have spent so much money and so many man-hours to actively restore the river herring runs, only to be undermined by these vessels that operate right off of our shores. So what we're asking from the town, and we've gotten a lot of support as we've gone around Cape from other towns and conservation trusts, is that the town support us in writing a letter to the New England Fisheries Management Council supporting the implementation of what we call a year-round buffer zone, which would essentially push these vessels with their gear much farther offshore. And if you have any questions, I'll be leaving our flyers just in the back, and I'll also leave a copy of our presentation and my card as well.
Madam
Maybe
Chair?
Hines?
Yeah, I just wanted to, two things. We have the written letter of support that's in your signature package. And then I think if Hines can give his 2 cents as the Natural Resources Officer, I think it would make some sense for the board to hear that input.
Yeah, that would be good.
No, we just, if you want these, we can hand them out. They're just PowerPoints that just reiterate everything that's on our handouts. So try and keep it nice and concise for you.
Maybe, Hines, if you can get up and just say a little bit about the significance of this.
Hello, for those who don't know me, I'm Heinz Broff, the Natural Resources Director, but I also have the title of the Herring Warden in the town of Harwich. I know the letter that was presented to the Board of Selectmen to give some historical perspective information of the herring that she described, the river herring in Harwich. Harwich has been in the forefront of herring and maintenance and migration and protecting these fish for a long time. In 2004, the town actually put in its own moratorium on the taking of river herring that were coming up due to the low counts that we had at the time. It was 2 years later that the state of Massachusetts decided to do the same. And we got a phone call that said, you know, we're going to institute this moratorium, you're aware of that, which is great, but Harwich is already 2 years ahead of them. And since that time, we continue to maintain our herring runs, and because they're not really seen or well-traveled, the public doesn't have, you know, direct access other than the Johnson's Flume, which we manage and maintain. With Division of Fisheries, we have an electronic counter there now for the last 2 years. We have an aluminum extension that we came from the Board of Selectmen to do to provide an extension into Long Pond, which is the largest freshwater body on Cape Cod, and fish migrate through Hinckley's Pond to get there through Harwich. So we are a conduit to the largest freshwater body on Cape Cod that we share with Brewster. We currently work today, and we will the next 2 days, on the connection from Hinckley's to Seymour Pond. That's being worked on. So there's money within natural resources and attention paid to our herring run every spring with the AmeriCorps. We work 2 or 3 days clearing all the obstruction of the run. So as you described, the town of Harwich has done a lot in terms of manpower, time, money, and energy to protect and do what we can. But as she described, once you get outside our miles off Harwich, what can we do? Not much, other than to support a leather like this. It could only benefit the river herring. There are other challenges that they have to deal with, things like water level, other types of predators, but this is one of the things that we can kind of look at to help what we already have been doing in the town of Harwich for many, many years.
That's great. Chris, do we need, you want us to take a vote on this? Do we need to take?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. I think it would be good to have be board policy, board support.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah. We heard this, I was mentioning, we heard this presentation at the Cape Cod Municipal Association a couple weeks ago. Not to pick on Seth, but I'm told he broke his foot doing housework. Well, let that be a lesson to us all.
Watch out,
But
winter.
I didn't realize the connection between the freshwater herring and the marine water herring. And that we, as Heinz says, we do a lot to protect the freshwater herring, but hadn't spent a lot of time worrying about the marine water. And it passed on that association meeting as a no-brainer. They moved it up. Usually we have to get a draft and come back in next month. It's such an obvious protection to move. And we're not stopping all the fishing out. We're just moving the buffer out to give us a fighting chance, right?
Yes.
How
This
far is the buffer?
This is one vessel with one type of gear. There are other vessels, like our small day boats that we represent, that still can fish close to shore, but they're not using such harmful gear that essentially decimates the entire ecosystem.
And this is, the herring is not the absolute bottom, towards the bottom of the feeding system, so it's essential to protect what we're doing. So for me, this is extremely easy, and I wish we could move it faster.
Me too.
Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was on the board that voted the original moratorium, and I got to say that Heinz is actually understating what we did. The state actually sent us a letter. They were going to threaten to bring enforcement officers down and cut bolts off and open up the runs. It turned out that we were on the right side of the issue, and I think Larry's right. We're going to be on the right side of it again.
Janelle?
I just have a question about implementing this moratorium. In order to do so, do you need every single town's support on Cape Cod, or would there ever be like spot enforcement in the ocean? So
there's a series of alternatives that the New England Fisheries Management Council has created for analysis, a series of 9 of them, and they range anywhere from 12 nautical miles to 50 nautical miles offshore. And based on the best scientific information that their team is able to find is how they'll make that decision of how far it will go out. I think your question was, do you need support from every town on Cape Cod? The answer is no. Individual town support is absolutely appropriate and highly encouraged. And we've also been working with a lot of the conservation trusts around here that help run the herring monitoring programs, and they've been very supportive as well. We're hoping that every town will support us, and we did get support from the Selectmen and Councilors Association earlier this month as a representative of the whole Cape, and we'll be meeting with the Assembly of Delegates later this week as well. But any support that we have, we feel strongly that individual town and unanimous support shows the council how important this issue is.
I was just going to say, Madam Chair, it's kind of interesting. I've been in municipal government for a long time, and our authority really is on the land. All water is considered to be property of the Commonwealth, so any of the lakes, ponds are actually Commonwealth property, unless a small enough pond could be within someone's land. But then the oceans actually fall under federal jurisdiction. So this would be really just a support to the federal agency to make sure that they can update the regulation to protect us.
Thank you. So do we feel that the letter, which is well-written, is sufficient for the support that we're looking to give? Okay, so can I get a motion?
I move we get this language right. Well, I move we support the proposed buffer
Second.
to protect the herring.
Yes.
And sign the letter and send
And
it.
sign the letter and send it.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All right. so I want to vote.
Aye.
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 Unanimous.
Good luck.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, I'll leave my business card and some materials behind, so you can feel free to take a look through them.
Thank you very much. Okay. We're going to have the annual meetings with the Selectmen for the various boards of the Cultural Council, Brooks Academy Museum, Youth Services Committee, and Rec and Youth Committee. So we'll start with the Cultural Council.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Tina Games, Chair of the Cultural Council, and here to present my annual report. You have a copy of it in front of you, so I won't go over everything that you've probably already read, but I did want to touch on a few things because you asked very specific questions, so I wanted to address those. The first was member attendance. For the most part, we have really good attendance at our meetings. We do have a couple of members who go to Florida for 3 and maybe 4 months. So the way that we've worked that out is they are here in the fall when it's really crucial for our grant program. And, you know, we've managed to work around it and have gotten a quorum. So I'll just, you know, put that out there. We've managed with it, but I'll just address, you know, that question for you. All of our members are sworn in. The state ethics testing has been completed. We are one of the, I guess, the very few in the town of Harwich of committees, councils, boards that report to the state and to the town. So we're all up to the state level. I post the agenda and the minutes every month. I personally do those, so I can assure you that they're up to date. So that is that part. Any questions?
Anybody?
All right. In the report, I wanted to just kind of highlight a couple of things for you. This year, you know, the Harwich Cultural Council is responsible for issuing cultural grants every year. That's actually the big part of what we do. And this year, we just closed out our grant application process. We received 30 grant applications, which is up from 24 from last year. Everything is online. We like to save trees at the Cultural Council, so everything is now online and very easy process, so we're excited about that. There's been a request, when you total all 30 applications, $26,788. Unfortunately, we don't have that much money to award, but we did approve $10,000. So we're going to really have our work cut out for us to really look through those grants. And let's see, I wanted to also note, that Ann Leet left our Cultural Council this year, and I just want to recognize her publicly. She's given quite a lot to the Cultural Council. And we welcomed a new member, Roseanne Shapiro. So she has been an absolute delight, and we're excited to have her. And 2 other things I'd like to note. The Harwich Cultural Council has been engaging in dialogue with the Harwich Cultural Center. We are very, very happy. We just voted at our last meeting as a group to support their efforts. So we are going to get behind them, and just want to also make that public because that hasn't been made public yet. This is the first time you're hearing it. So we do very much support them. We've met with Erica. Carolyn's already left, but we've met with Carolyn, and we want to just put forth our energy into that project. And the Massachusetts Cultural Council is also going to get involved because we have been selected in Harwich as one of 7 towns in the Commonwealth to participate in a pilot program sponsored by the Massachusetts Cultural Council. We're going to be having a lot of dialogues here in the next 3 to 4 months about how the state can get involved locally. And so they're very excited about that project, and we're going to be meeting, having lots of meetings and talking about how we can make that initiative successful. And I think that's it, really. You've got everything else in your report. Any questions?
Why don't you start, Janelle?
Tina, thank you for getting involved with the Cultural Center. I think that's great. I just have a question about membership, which I was not aware of, that the charter says 5. Mass law says 5 to 22, and ours says 9.
Thank you for raising that. We have had some confusion over the years. I mean, this is my 2nd year being the chair. And I know before me, it is very confusing because the state has certain members listed with certain terms ending than the town. So we've got to do something to get those synchronized. It's my understanding that we have 9 members. We're kind of going with what the town says. The state is aware of that. Nothing has been said any differently. We have 8 active members and 1 vacancy. So we're working with 9. I don't know where the 5 came from. 5 might be the minimum, I guess. I don't know.
It may be, but according to our charter, it says 5, which I was unaware of as
okay,
well. And I'm
all
the
right.
liaison,
Yeah.
so.
And I'm the chair, so.
Maybe
Yeah.
we just have to make sure that we get
Okay.
this all the i's dotted and all the t's crossed.
Okay.
So everybody's on the same page.
Okay.
But the state says 9, or knows that you
The
have
s-
9?
Yeah, the state knows that we have 9.
Okay.
And as far as I know, and again, I took over the chair position last year, it was passed on to me as 9. So I don't know, I guess we'll have to go back through and see where that 5 came from. I don't know. I'm sorry, I really don't know.
That's all right. We'll work on it together.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
John, do you have any questions?
Yeah, charter was amended last year with the intention of getting numbers for committees this year as bylaw changes. I can't recall off the top of my head, Sandy Hall is here. I'm not sure. Did we
put her on
take
the
an
spot.
action the last year? Was that part of what we did? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's,
We'll look into it, but the one thing I can
Okay.
say is absent a charter amendment, the charter's numbers, I'd have to go back and see when the bylaw got accepted, but the charter's numbers are the charter, that's the constitution of the town.
okay. So I guess my question would be, since and we operate within 2 sets of guidelines, the
Right.
state and the town. So I guess my question would be, how does the state, receive that too? So I guess maybe I need to look into that as well?
Go ahead. Tom.
No, it's a home rule, that's what a home rule charter is about.
Oh,
When they-
oh, I
When
see,
they
okay.
afford a range, whatever they
Right.
say, what we adopt, if it's within that range,
Okay.
is what goes.
Oh, okay, all right. That's interesting.
So
We'll get back to you.
Okay,
I'll look
all
it up.
right,
So,
Okay.
Chris, we'll put that on.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
We'll follow up.
okay. So before I step down, so 5 members is what you're saying, is what we should have, is that,
Not necessarily.
okay,
There may be some place along the way that 9 was approved.
okay, all right,
We're going committee by committee and
Okay.
finding that there are various discrepancies.
okay.
So we'll
All
get
right.
to the bottom of it.
So you and you're my liaison, so we'll work on it.
Yep.
Everything.
And we hope
Okay.
of seeing
Yeah,
you
I-
downstairs.
Congratulations on being selected as one of the 7 communities.
Yeah, we were very excited.
Can you
Yeah.
go into
Yeah.
that in a little more depth? Did you apply for that?
Yes, we actually did. There was a survey, it was kind of like a survey more than an application, but there was a survey sent to all the chairs across the Commonwealth with a series of questions that I answered, in collaboration with our group. And I don't know this for a fact, but I will put this out there. But the Cultural Center, there were a lot of questions about it, and I do believe that probably had a lot to do with our selection, because the Massachusetts Cultural Council was looking for towns that have a strong cultural community. And not only the Cultural Center and what we've done, but we were looking at the Cranberry Music Festival, we were looking at Brooks Academy. I mean, there's a lot of organizations and venues and all these wonderful things we do in Harwich. So I think there was a whole lot they were looking at. And that's kudos to us as a town for having such a vibrant cultural community. And that's what they said when they were looking. We were the only ones chosen on the Cape, so we were excited about that. And then one of 7 across the Commonwealth. So,
Now you've done all the work.
Yeah.
It'd be good to put that on the website to
Yeah.
share it. So people are,
yeah.
they
And
take credit for it, and as a community, we can take credit for it.
right, and I'll put something together, and I guess, who would I send that to? Janelle, to
Send
you?
that to-
Okay. And we can put that on there.
Yeah, be good.
All right, great. And that just came, we just found that out last week, so this has been very, very fresh news for us.
Oh, that's
All right.
exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so
you.
much.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Now we're going to have the Brooks Academy Museum Commission.
Old face, new title. Since September, I've been the chair of this commission. Thank you all very much. Attendance was not good previously. I guess the last meeting before September was in March. But since then has been good. We've held 2 meetings, one in September and one in October. And tonight we have 80% of the 5-member commission here. So if you have any questions about stuff before I was involved, then please ask Sandy Hall, Barry Knowles, or Peg Rose. We have a full commission. I hope 5 is the right number, 5 members. And all have been sworn in, have taken ethics tests, and we are posting agendas and minutes. So, I would just mention briefly, since I haven't been there very long, I have been involved in the Kroll Barn, which shares the property with the museum. The final invoice for the Kroll Barn was just processed. It's amazing in some ways that it took so long, but that's good news, and that's a completed building, and the security system is now in.
The red light is on.
So that's gonna, the director, Janet Cassidy, had wanted to get some exhibits up this fall. Looks like that'll probably be in the spring, but now the security system is going to allow that to happen. The Brooks Museum, the building itself, I'm getting up to speed. There are needs in that building. Fortunately, there are 2 CPC articles, one from 2008, which was for exterior work, 20,000 of which was spent on windows. The remaining 50,000 plus has not been spent. Also in 2014, there was an article approved for 30,000 for studying the needs of that building. So that's all the good news I relayed to the committee last time. The less good news, and they're hearing that for the first time, is the CPC chair has informed me that they're considering whether those articles should remain as is because they've gone unspent for so long. So I'm going to a meeting next Thursday, I believe it is, and the 3 of you who are here, I ask you to join me. So we've been put on the CPC agenda to discuss those articles. I've been asked to mention that the property has been improved in appearance considerably by the Garden Club, and their efforts should be recognized. And I say that not just because of my only personal connections to the Garden Club, but for other reasons. The farmers market had a very busy year. They share the parking lot, and we're going to try to make sure to work with the Agricultural Committee and any other people who are involved to keep that a strong and well-functioning location. There's an awful lot about the museum that I don't know, and we'll answer your questions as well as possible or defer to the other committee members.
Janelle, do you want to have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. I went on a 2nd grade field trip recently, and we built cranberry bogs in a small clear plastic cup, and it was very, very interesting. And Mr. Rainio gave us a tour of the cranberry room, and great history there.
Good.
So I would encourage anybody that has not visited that to go check it out. Really, really interesting stuff.
Larry?
I agree with that, although I like the model train up there. I guess that's coming to an end, though. I think if I can ask you, David, and maybe Peg Rose can comment as well. A question about, and Chris, directed towards you, the transfer of the Kroll Barn, does that go to the town historic commission? What's the status of that now that it's completed and the last invoice has been paid?
Yeah, I'll have to look into the status of that list.
Yeah, I dragged out the folder in the planning department to see what was in there, and I just went through that a few minutes ago. It's not in there. So we do have to, there was an agreement before the Kroll Barn was done, but there's going to be a copy of it certainly in your department, Chris. And
So that seems to be an issue we need to clear up and be sure that the right people
Maintain it.
maintain
Right.
it
Right. Yeah.
and own it, whatever the situation is.
We'll have to follow
But
up on that.
good report, good job, those look good. And I love having the farmer's market there. I know we always talk about space, but we're the only ones that sit, at least around here, at the farmer's market's not in the middle of a parking lot.
And I'm told that the vendors really like that location. I haven't spoken to any personally. There have been some questions in the past about the location, but I think it's doing well.
Well, I think they've, if you may, a lot of the issues have been traffic, and I think with the signs and stuff, I haven't heard
I haven't heard anything lately.
much negative feedback the last year or two. So.
Don, do you have anything?
Last time I was there a couple of weeks ago, I was impersonating a captain. But I had an opportunity to take a look at the displays then and a couple of months prior. You do terrific work.
David, maybe do you want to state the hours for the public in terms of the times?
Well, actually, right now, none, because the museum itself closed for the season over Columbus Day weekend, but we will be open the 3 Saturdays before Christmas in December. For Christmas in Harwich, the first week, and then the second and third Saturdays as well, from 1 to 4, same time that we're open, you know, when it is in season. We will have a Victorian Christmas exhibit. The ladies on the museum committee worked their fingers to the bone last year putting this exhibit together. It's on the 2nd floor, and it's a sea captain's parlor. And they came up with all sorts of fascinating stuff, you know, to put in the exhibit, and to make it seasonal, it will be a Victorian Christmas exhibit, as I said, for the 3 Saturdays in December.
Great, thank you.
And no, as far as the transfer of the property, I have an email into Janet, and she will, not only have we had changes on the commission, but we've also had changes in administration at the museum. And so Janet, when she goes in on Wednesday, is going to start to search for what we have on that. And I sent Desiree an email today, and she gave me what she remembered about it. So
Okay.
hopefully we'll get it all pieced together.
Yeah, we'll follow up on it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your report and all the hard work you do.
Thank you.
Okay, can we have the Youth Services Committee?
Hello, my name is Brooke Canada. I am the co-chair of the Harwich Youth Services Committee, who is actually here in their entirety tonight. So they're here. We are at 100%, and I believe everybody has been sworn in and completed the ethics also. The Harwich Youth Services Committee met 7 times during the past 12 months. We recently welcomed Paula McGuire, a retired educator, to the committee. We supported the practice and the work of the town youth counselor, Sheila House, who has a thriving clinical practice and is on the following boards, groups, and commissions. She's on the Lower Cape Prevention Partnership, Barnstable County Regional Substance Abuse Commission, Substance Abuse Prevention Council, Massachusetts Opioid Prevention Council, Monomoy Regional School District Crisis Response Team, Cape and Islands Suicide Prevention Coalition, and the Harwich Children's Fund. Some of the things that we've done in the last year, we have helped promote the first annual Parent Summit hosted by the Barnstable County Regional Substance Abuse Commission. The event was filled to capacity, and it highlighted the theme of parenting to prevention. We also conducted an informal needs assessment by identifying gaps in the after-school programs for younger students, ages 5 to 13. The Monomoy Middle School has a number of after-school clubs and an after-school program, and we found with the earlier release time this year for elementary school that there are some needs for after-school programming. Some of the churches in the area, such as Pilgrim Congregational Church, have started to offer after-school programs as well to sort of fill those gaps. We hosted a showing of Screenagers Growing Up in the Digital Age on March 22nd with the support from Monomoy peer leaders. We had over 200 parents and students and community members who came, and the students supporting the event said it was one of the best attended evening events they'd been part of. We promoted and hosted 2 presentations, one for students, one for parents, to roll out the data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which was administered in November of 2016. The results of the survey are available through the Monomoy Regional School District office. Some trends included high numbers for distracted driving, driving while texting, driving while impaired, and being a passenger with an impaired driver. The most significant protective factor for youth was parent involvement and parent messaging. We supported the formation of a Harwich Children's Fund to complement the Chatham Children's Fund. Retired teachers have come together to get this effort off the ground. Their current initiative is an outerwear drive and holiday gift drive, and they'll be hosting holiday activities for families and kids at the Albro House in December during the Harwich Stroll this year. We hosted the Monday Night Summer Concert Series sponsored by TD Bank during the month of July, and we promoted a Save a Life tour on October 16th. This was for juniors and seniors at the high school, and it featured a documentary film with people who had been impacted by impaired and distracted driving, followed by a short talk with the presenters. And then during the remainder of the school day, the students were invited to come down in groups of 30 and try simulators that dramatically illustrated the dangers of impaired and distracted driving. One was texting while driving, and one was driving while impaired. And then upcoming goals for 2017-2018, we're hoping to host girls and boys nights for middle school youth at both the Chatham and Harwich community centers. We're sponsoring dances for the 8th grade class and promoting the 2nd annual parent summit in November, and collaborating with the Harwich Children's Fund on fundraising ideas and outreach. So that's it. Any questions?
Dawn, do you have any questions?
She had me with the driver's ed area. I taught for 15 years, and they don't quite understand that even over-the-counter drugs, Benadryl or whatever, when they talk about not operating heavy machinery, I don't think anybody's got anything that's hanging around their house that weighs more than 3,500 pounds.
Yes.
So just the idea of not doing stuff. I know that we had one story, which is pretty much what you're trying to stop, of one kid getting his license, and the next day his friends were driving with him, which they shouldn't have been, and they opened up his toolbox and started flinging screwdrivers around inside the car as he was driving. So trying to reach kids before they actually drive is an important issue.
Absolutely.
But thanks for what you do. And thanks, Sheila.
And Sheila has one quick thing.
I just wanted to let everybody know we had a very successful event Saturday night at the Albro House. We had honored guests like Ant-Man, Iron Man, Elsa, Dougie the Dragon. Those were on. So we had a Halloween open house. There were about 40 or 50 kids that came through with their parents. Everybody had a great time. And I just want to do a shout out to the 4 students that supported the event by being there with the kids. And they were Caitlin German, Julia Ryu, Emma Santoni, and Lily McCaskill. So it was a great event, and we're going to do something similar for the holidays. Thanks.
And do you have any questions?
Yeah, Sheila, while don't go yet. While you're busy. But the Barnstable County Regional Substance Abuse, Mr. Kukunis, has come to us several times asking if the county's doing enough for us. Are they doing it? Is there other things they could be doing to help on the Substance Abuse Commission that we should be
Well, it's
feeding back
interesting
to them?
that you asked that, because the Regional Substance Abuse Council and the Opioid Prevention Council, the funding is grant funding for the positions of the people that are running those initiatives. So what we're going to try to get off the ground is restart the Lower Cape Prevention Partnership, which is the local coalition for Harwich and Chatham and surrounding towns in the Lower Cape. And our primary mission before was to do education and outreach in the community and in the schools, but we're going to have a kind of a restart brainstorming session so that the Barnstable people can support our efforts going forward, because they're not always going to be there. So.
Okay, good. So that's the message to those, that you're looking for more help as you move forward.
Yeah, so that'll be at the high school on November 13th at 3:25 in the guidance office if anybody wants to come. I'll send you all an email about it. I've invited fire, police from both towns, and people from this committee, and the school nurse, the regular folks. So.
And I have a second question, if I may. Regarding the after-school program for the elementary school. I know you mentioned several things going on. Are you or someone coordinating that, so there's a single place for parents go to be, for that,
Well,
to meet that, you know, to meet that need?
Yeah, the main program right now is the one that's at the elementary school, but I had heard that they had a waiting list, or, you know, that there are a lot of kids that, because of the new school time, are in need of that. And I know that at Pilgrim Church, they're trying to start one up, so Brooke and, who else?
Debbie Larson.
Debbie Lester?
Larson.
Larson. She's the one at Pilgrim Church, so.
And so is there anyone coordinating that activity, or, and that's the thing I'm trying to get at, is things happening, is someone putting it together, I guess?
We sort of just did called
Everyone's trying to
around to
help
all,
out, yeah.
like, the recreation centers and called, you know, got in touch with the elementary school, but, so there isn't really a coordinator among our group, I guess.
Maybe that's something your committee could look at, is just trying to get a listing of who's doing what to whom, right?
Yeah.
So they know.
Oh, Eric?
That's sort of the part that we've done as a committee.
Julia, can you, yes? Can you, no, no, can you
She's
just
Brooke.
come up?
That's
Oh, I'm sorry, Brooke. Excuse me.
That's all right.
Can you just-
It's all right, they're co-chairs, I get it.
That's something that the committee has done. We called around to sort of find out what's going on and where the gaps are. And so when we identified the need for the elementary after-school program, Pilgrim Church stepped up and said, we've got the space and we've got a director and we're willing to put something together. And so we sort of work with Debbie and advise her what the needs are, and then she's developing a program around that. And so we're just.
And it might be really good to come up with the list of everything, because I know Eric will be reporting about the programming he has, and we've certainly checked in with Chatham. They have a pretty good program as well, so.
Okay.
But it'd be good to
Eric,
get
did you
a
want to
list of
speak to
everything.
that? Can you just state your name?
Yeah, I'm Eric Beebe, Recreation Director. I was just going to add, we do elementary school programming every day of the week. So I recently was asked to be on the elementary school committee to kind of coordinate with the early release times. So we've been doing our pickups. We have Mondays is arts and crafts, Tuesday tennis, Wednesday indoor soccer, Thursday is flag football, and Friday is Fun Friday. But with the early release time, excuse me, we had extra time to plan out, so we started a little homework club. We bus them back to the community center. They do homework, they color, they do all sorts of stuff until the rest of our staff gets there, and then they go to their programs. So we're trying to take as many kids as we can on a daily basis as well to help out. So that was it.
Great, thank you, Eric. And Brooke, what?
Before they leave, I wanna ask
Okay, yeah, Brooke, can I just ask you one question on Mr. Hartley?
Yes.
My understanding is he's coming in next week to get sworn in, right?
I did get sworn in today.
Oh, you did? Okay, great, that's great. And I'm the liaison to your committee, and I wish it wasn't on Mondays only because it's hard to get to your committee, but I just want to acknowledge all the hard work you do, and phenomenal and very timely. I mean, we're talking opioid workshops that you're doing, we're talking screenagers, and I know that got great reviews. Never mind, you know, working with the youth in terms of trying to deal with the gaps on changing the school schedules, and also, you know, although I don't get to many your meetings, but I just want to acknowledge that you do a lot of great work, so thank you.
Thank you.
before that.
Oh, sorry, Dawn had something else.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out for something that you didn't give yourself credit for. Our little 10-year-old went to the mentoring program that is on the other side of the continuum with the Council on Aging for girls mentoring. That was a terrific program, and I understand it's going to
The Girl Power.
Girl Power.
We're going to be, I met with Judy, the new COA director, and we're going to be doing 2 sessions of that with 3rd and 4th grade kids again. And I have a whole lot of new seniors that are interested in being mentors, so that's great.
Right,
It was terrific for like self-worth and.
I know, they just soared. It was wonderful.
that's excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, Youth and Rec?
Good evening, John Mahan, Chairman of Youth and Rec. I believe you have a copy of our report that we sent over. First of all, I'd like to comment on the little 4 questions. Great reminder, because we're all busy and things always slide under the radar, so thank you very much. We are up to date on people being sworn in, ethics, minutes, and agendas are being posted on a regular basis. A couple things I just wanted to touch base on. I don't know if all of you have seen it, but Red River Beach has been resurfaced. Looks fantastic. It'd make a great street hockey rink. But it is, it is up to snuff, and I'm sure the people that walk down there every day are very much appreciative of it. The other thing is Brooks Park continues to come along, and I know some of you have seen it and commented on Facebook that the use that is getting between the pickleball and the playground and now the pavilion that's set up, comments have been fantastic, unsolicited. People just say, hey, thanks for, and not to forget the expanded parking, because the question was asked at first, why do we need it? Well, if you've checked it out on a summer day, even this time of the year, Friday morning, pickleball people have that additional parking full. So that is moving right along. An observation I made is driving around town, and I'm not sure if you're aware of it as a town. In the spring, we host, and this is not just rec, but the town in general, we host the ECAC College Baseball Tournament. Memorial Day, we hold a multi-day youth soccer tournament behind the community center, now at Monomoy, and I believe they do 2 or 3 other towns as well. Then after the summer, we host senior softball. Then Columbus Day, we hold another multi-day soccer tournament. And then right after that, they do the Cape Cod Half Marathon. So people are coming to Harwich for all sorts of different recreational events. And I think that's a huge kudo for the town, personally. Let me see here. I'd like to make a special thanks to, and I apologize for not getting here the Monday after the fireworks, to Cindy Williams and Dave LeBlanc. I went down to White House Monday morning to check on the condition after the fireworks, because there were concerns. The place was immaculate. It looks like they might have taken a vacuum to it. So again, kudos to Cindy and Dave and whoever else helped out. As always, shout out to the taxpayers for continuing to support the rec department through CPC articles and whatnot. And then last but by no means least, the highway department, because we all know we have some of the best beaches on the Cape. Our parks are always immaculate, so they do a great job, sometimes under adverse conditions, but they do a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
No, good report, and I agree. Brooks Park, the new pavilion and the fences, looks great.
Yeah.
What a nice center, and I appreciated riding my bike on Red River Beach and not
I'm sure you did.
The big water puddle is always there, and the
Yeah.
sand on the sides. So.
Not anymore, Larry.
You know,
Good report.
I don't really have anything to question about, but I will say that my son did the program this summer and absolutely doesn't want to go to any other camp again, ever.
There you go. That's
Thank
kudos
you.
to Eric and his staff.
Don?
Yeah, pretty much more of the same. You guys do a great job. Eric's always done a great job.
Thank you.
I want to thank you too. You both do a great job for the community, and I know from, my kids are grown now, but I know that they were addicted to the camps and everything that, the rec offers, so, I think we should all be grateful. The kids are well entertained.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So moving on to new business. We have the Community Compact IT grant and just some discussion about that. You know that the chair had looked at some information on that, and it looks like some great opportunities. And we've talked about IT extensively over the last year and our need for some major improvements, just as technology changes and things need upgrading and really also security-wise. So we want to open up that discussion.
And maybe, Madam Chair, just to maybe get things rolling a little bit, I did have an opportunity to kind of go through, I know the chair's been looking at various grants. We are already in competition on the community compact, that we're not doing the IT grant. We're part of the application for the 3 towns, and that's about $200,000 with Dennis, Harwich, and Yarmouth. The meeting that Larry and I go to at least once a month on Friday mornings. So that grant has been submitted. So I did look through, and I will talk. I have a small IT session, I think later on this week, to start actually tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact, to start talking about the status. We had said to the board we would do a review. I will bring these ideas to that group and see if there's anything we want to do, or bring it to department heads as well as the IT director, and see if there's anything we want to submit relevant to this. We have until January 15th, so we'll look and see which one makes sense to kind of explore and pursue.
Okay. Any other comments?
My comment is, and I guess I probably said this before, but it seems to me that grant writing is a spatial skill and some magic. And I think it's hard to ask our department heads to always be on top of making those applications. And I wonder, and I'm not sure we have the resources to hire a grant writer or work something out, but I wonder if it's something we should be exploring with our neighboring towns, say Chatham and Brewster or something, to get someone to help write the grants when we see them. I think I agree with, maybe it's Michael's comment, that we need a better way of tracking potential grants. And I know, to see what's out there, but once that's done, it'd be great to have someone who, knows that, I call it art of grant writing, since I don't have that. And I would like to suggest that we see if we can formalize that and see if there's interest in other towns of working together, at least on the grant writing, a person that we can get every so often to help us on the actual putting that together.
Janelle?
I think that's a good idea, Larry. I'm a little confused, Chris, about the community compact, the IT grant versus the wastewater. If you are applying for one, does it preclude you from applying for the other?
That I need to check on. I just wanted to at least point that out. I know we are formally submitting it under the community compact. When we got the certification, or what's the other grant there for doing the financial study, when we signed up, we were one of the few towns on the Cape that hadn't become a community compact member. So as part of that process, we have formally now joined that community compact.
Okay.
So we are putting in one category, and I will check. I don't think we're presupposed where we can't, but sometimes if a town gets one in one category, they like to share, the money, or spread the money as far as they can. But I will check in terms of the status on that to see, and then quite honestly, which one of those makes sense. I mean, since I've been here, we have tried to do more regional efforts. I know on the housing front, we have the 4 towns are kind of working on housing, and that's
moving in that direction.
That's a good idea to see if we can expand into doing the grant writing. So that's something that we will look. I do want to just commend, though. I think in this town, I think our department heads do an outstanding job of obtaining grants, and we could certainly improve.
I'm not arguing that, but they have a lot of things on their plate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does take a little bit of a skill, but I think as a small town, we do a good job of submitting. I mean, John Rendon by himself, I think he's had 3 grants. One of them was $1 million. So just as a reference to the community to know that we do look. We're not always successful because we do have amateurs that are writing it, myself included. So the point's well taken.
Well, plus it's a funny target sometimes, too.
Don?
Not to pick. I have one follow-up question, if I may. In terms of just IT and, some of these grants are for hardware and software and things going on. I know I've gotten some feedback from some of our paper-intensive committees. It'd be good if they could also get the packets like we do. And if we could, is there any way we could support either those laptops or some more software, whatever happens. Because if you look at planning or conservation, it's hard to do that with the plans, of course. You need that. But there also is a lot of paperwork involved in some of our committees. And I would think if there's somewhere we could, maybe that's another grant opportunity, to somehow support moving that more toward the computer side of things and away from paper as we've done. You know, it would benefit them, it'd make it easier, make it more transparent, because that thing would be on the internet, on the website. We'd be politically correct, we're reducing, you know, burning paper. I'm always for politically correct.
I know you are.
I think it's something that'd be worthwhile looking into. It's kind of a long shot, I know. I'd like to see what we can do.
So are you thinking that you'd like to see the packets as similar to what we get emailed out to all the committee members instead of them getting any kind of handouts?
I am.
Okay, so I think that's a good idea, and I think that plays also into our email
Right, yeah.
issue. So I think we need to get a hold of that.
Because we can't do the, you know, the engineered site plans, obviously, that's too big, but all the accompanying paperwork that
Right, the
that they handle.
applications and things like that, right. But I think that leads to the point of why we really need to look seriously at these IT grants, because when I looked through the packet, I mean, there was just a multitude of different programs that they were getting monies for. Some of them were already, you know, we already have things underway with online permitting and that kind of stuff, but certainly other, you know, other types of IT things that we could do to improve our overall system. And I mean, any money that we could get that's free is terrific. And I think you raise a really good point too about getting some expertise, because in terms of grant writing, I think there's a real, you know, speciality to it. And I also think that we have great department heads that are getting some really good monies, but any help and support we could offer them, and maybe even centralize it, could certainly only benefit us. So Chris, you'll look into, hopefully there's no kind of conflict with the other grants, with the compact, that we could go with this too. So we should probably put this on for further discussion when the chair is back too. So, okay, so.
That's fine.
And the next item on our agenda is in regard to the Cape Cod Compact Joint Powers Agreement. And this is a change in the overall municipal agreements. It's really just slight. So just bringing it to the public's attention. I don't know, does anyone have any questions, concerns?
No.
You could make it longer, but you was.
Go ahead.
I did find it somewhat amusing that they deleted municipal and entered the word county in.
Well,
The reality is that we're still municipalities that are constituent members.
I actually did have a question on that, in that they've inserted the municipal and the counties, but they lost me somewhat, probably in several, but they lost me a little bit about, early on, it assigns the counties a limited role in this process. But then, towards the end, it gives them voting powers. So it's internally not consistent in that regard. And I don't know what they seem to be trying to write a fine line of having the counties involved and not have too much influence. And I'm not sure they've done that well.
I think some of that has to relate also though to some of it, the relocation and some amendments that they're.
Yeah, and I think just maybe for the folks at home that are kind of looking at this and trying to understand what's going on, that the Cape Light Compact was kind of an intermunicipal group that worked in a certain way, and they had limitations. So they've made a transition to what they call a joint powers agreement. And in essence, what they've done is they take away some of the authority that was given directly to the boards and for members to vote, and has given it to the governing body. And as a element of that, they wanted to make sure that people were fully informed of what transactions were happening. So they have a requirement that 30 days before a vote, that people are given notice to be aware. And that's really what this is, the notice that's been provided. You know, in terms of looking at it, it's not much different. They've just made a few tweaks to what the board had, given acknowledgement to back when they did the joint powers agreement. So I think we'll see this as more formality as we move forward when they make tweaks to it. But I do think any comments that you make this evening, that I think the representative, can certainly bring some of those back prior to the meeting, so that way if there is, why remove municipal and not keep county when we're all
Inserted
municipal,
county.
we're all municipal entities, including the county is a governmental entity.
Right.
I think those are good comments.
Any further
No.
discussion?
No.
No? Okay. On to the next item, which is C, committee absences, and some discussion on that. I mean, I think we all, we're all liaisons to various boards. We know that certain committees have some issues with absences. We've tried to address them. We continue to try to address them. It's important to, I believe the charter says that you cannot have more than 4 unexcused absences. So we're lucky to have volunteers, but we need those volunteers to come to the meeting, so. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One comment I would make, and I kind of made it at the last meeting when we took the recommendation of the planning board for the absences of a member and took them off. There was another member that had almost the exact same number of absences, and if this is going to be fair and honest, then it's 4, and whoever it is needs to be counseled, and if they can't go, you can't pick and choose who it is you want to kind of maintain on the rolls and who it is you want to see taken off. It's 4, and you can work with them to see if they can attend, but that's the way it is.
Right. Larry?
No, I agree. We should get people there. I know they've broadened the opportunities for remote participation in the last go-around.
Right.
Made it a little easier. You didn't have to be on your deathbed to be able to get that, to use that.
Right.
They broadened the reasons for being able to, so maybe that helps if that word gets out. They still need a quorum.
Right.
And they can't abuse it, but maybe we need to be sure people understand those possibilities. But I agree with Don, and you, we need to.
Do something, yeah. Janelle?
I don't have anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know, and Dawn, you're more the expert on the charter. I mean, I don't know if there's a way that, and I'm just thinking out loud about, we show support as liaisons to say, look, if you have somebody who's been absent more than 4 times, you reach out and let us know that, because sort of back to the conversation that came up before, I mean, those were kind of excessive absences that we weren't necessarily aware of. And I'm the liaison, and I hadn't heard that info, so I think, I don't know if that's something we can do through the charter, or you know what I'm saying, in terms of some type of reporting back. Because as liaisons, we're not at every committee meeting, we don't know. And yet if if some committees want to reach out and say that there's an issue, that's great. But if others don't, we don't know. Yeah, go
If I
ahead.
might comment on that, in a lot of the methodology I've been using to try to track down what's been going on, I find it pretty easy to go on the town site and look at minutes. Who's present, who's not present, and then whether the minutes themselves are properly voted on, and so you don't actually have to go
That's
to
true,
all
right.
the meetings. So
Just look at the minutes.
yeah, and I've reached out in the past on that, because there's a wealth of information. There's like, were the meetings posted right? Who was it that's consistently not going? And you can have that conversation. It's largely administrative. I don't think you touch the charter. You just basically use the charter.
Yeah, that makes more sense, I guess,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. All right, well, I think, we need to continue to have a conversation and monitor attendance a little bit better. Anything else on that?
No,
No.
thank you.
Okay. So, old business, we have the Trails Committee membership, the recommendation to disband the committee and make members conservation volunteers. Amy's not here tonight, but I believe she was, yeah.
Yeah, I do believe, Madam Chair, this is a committee, the chairman this chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Michael did go and chat with Amy and had a discussion. You know, I think, at least in my experience too, that when you have a Trails Committee, one of their primary roles that they really do is they walk the trails, they help to maintain the trails, and they provide feedback for when the trails are in need of additional repair. And I think that there's kind of, maybe a burden is the right word, to have them also come in and talk about it. And I think that in this case, I believe what the chairman has relayed to me is that, you know, if they're really people that are on the ground doing work, and there's just a level of coordination that's needed, you know, maybe we should change that role and have them be more formal volunteers. And if people want to do a certain section and report back, and then administratively, they can report back and let Amy know the status, and then Amy can let DPW know if there's work that needs to be done, or coordinate volunteers to go clear sections. So I think where the chairman was going with this is that, do we really need the bureaucratic element of having these meetings in addition to what they're already doing as volunteers on the ground? So I think in this circumstance, you know, that this is probably a good balance in which we don't need the bureaucracy of, you know, having people that have to have meetings, they have to take minutes, they have to do it, when in reality, they are people that like being out in nature and like doing work. And I think transitioning them from board members to volunteers probably makes a lot of sense. So I think formally, you know, that has to be a process. How was the Trails Committee formed? And then to go ahead and to say that formally we're not going to have them as a committee, but to recognize that they will continue to play an important part for the town as volunteers. And I think this is the first step towards accomplishing that end.
Yeah, and my understanding is that Amy is fine with having them fall under
Yes.
her guide. So, Don, did you have any questions?
Not a question so much as a comment. In a different discussion, just to distill down John Giorgio's three-page memo on the subject, pretty much whatever way it started, you undo it in that same
Correct.
mechanism. So if it was a construct of a town meeting, you'd have to go back to town meeting to do it. In this particular instance, I'm 99% certain that it was a construct of the Board of Selectmen, because I was on the board when they did that. In which case, you put notice up, it would be by vote of the Board of Selectmen to disband it, because it's not mentioned in the charter.
Okay. Janelle?
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do tonight, if everybody is amenable to that. I think it's a great idea. And I think, you know, I went to the last Trails Committee non-meeting because there was no quorum, actually. But it seems like the people who are involved really are more concerned with the trails themselves than just the bureaucratic atmosphere. So on the recommendation of our conservation agent, who brought this up to the committee in the first place, I would support her recommendation.
Okay.
My only reservation is I would like to be sure that the Trails Committee is in favor of it as well. Yeah,
Well, there are two members here,
maybe
so
they
we
can
could
speak to it.
certainly have them
About,
speak.
That's been discussed in their committee, because I don't want to pull the rug out of any committee that.
Well, that's what I feel was happening. My name's Wayne Cushestone. I'm not sure if I'm still the chairman or not. It just, I came before the board. I may be misrepresented 2 weeks ago when I was putting out our platform. Now that I've seen other people give their presentation, realize I didn't do it in the right manner. But when I asked for a better liaison with the Selectmen's Committee, I didn't mean personal, anybody in particular. I just we need more conversation together, because we were beholding to this committee. I sure didn't expect to come back 2 weeks later and fight for the committee to stay alive. I find it very ironic that you want to disband me 2 weeks later. Last week, I thought Janelle, you were going to propose that we lower our voting members from 7 to 5, so that it would ensure we had a quorum each week, that we could tend to business. I guess you weren't here, so that didn't come before the board. Now suddenly, unbeknownst to me, it's a good thing I looked to see what the agenda for the committee was tonight, and I see disbandment of committee. I don't think any member on our committee really had a chance to address anything. There wasn't enough members. There were a lot of suggestions at the last non-meeting. But I feel this committee's been around for a long time, and there's a lot of people who before me who put in serious effort. I don't want to see this committee fall apart just because I'm misspeaking or people have a wrong view of what this committee does. It seems to me it's important to stay as a committee because we have, besides picking up, we still have other agendas that we try to promote. How else do we address them? The Conservation Commission, Amy, I love the girl. She works so hard for us. She has only so much time in her day, and the Conservation Commission as such, you're really overburdened. They're really overburdened. They don't have time for us. And I would like the committee to listen to, first of all, let us have our next monthly meeting. Let us see what everyone feels. Janelle, if you could attend, you have your presentation. Everybody has their ideas, and we go from there. It's just, I just hate to see the rug pulled out of us for no reason.
Yeah, go ahead, Janelle.
So I'm a little surprised by your comments, Wayne, after the non-meeting that we all discussed, and it seemed that it was a little bit more geared, the people who were there were more apt to want to simply be volunteers. That's how I left that
didn't get that
meeting.
understanding at all.
But in any case, there's been issues with this committee. We don't know how many there's supposed to be. There are 9, but the charter says 7, and then they haven't been able to get a quorum. Or maybe it's there are 7 and the charter says 9, I can't remember. I think it's there are 9, but the charter says 7. And they don't have a quorum. The last meeting that they actually did have was technically shouldn't have even been a meeting because Wayne hadn't been sworn in.
So the point to this is?
So there's been a lot of problematic issues with the bureaucracy, as Chris was saying. And this is why Amy, the professional who is paid by the town, suggested this really maybe should be better off being volunteers of the trails. So, you know, I'm still going to stick with what Amy said.
Excuse me, let Janelle speak.
I'm still going to stick with what Amy is recommending because she is the paid professional. And frankly, I don't know that there would even be a quorum of this committee if we did keep it. And the charge also needs to be rewritten. Prior to, I guess it was in April, I started working with the prior chair and prior clerk to talk about the charge needing to be rewritten. And apparently they both resigned, and this information was not transferred to the new committee. So nobody knew except one person that we needed to rewrite the charge. So there's just been a lot of problematic lack of conversation, yet the trails are being well kept. So it seems, the other part of it that I know Michael has discussed is we as a board have way too many committees to deal with. 50-something, correct? This is really a volunteer effort to keep the trails maintained and to work directly with the conservation agent. So I'm still going to stick by that.
Okay. Don?
I just have a couple of questions. Wayne, when did you get sworn in?
Pardon me?
When did you get sworn in for your?
I got sworn in. I didn't know. See, when I was asked to join this committee, I was told I had to go in the office, and Don, I believe it was you that interviewed me and gave me, I thought that was swearing in. No one, the lady in the office, Sandy, nor whoever interviewed me, didn't tell me you had to go downstairs and raise your hand. I had no clue about it. So for 6 or 7 months from last summer, I hadn't raised my hand. I went downstairs and did it. As soon as I knew, it wasn't a big problem. But according after all the investigation, after I asked for more help from the committee. This was the fallout.
I just asked that question because in general, first of all, you're not even a member of a committee until you're sworn in legally. But I'm just wondering, that kind of got obscured in the report too. Is everybody sworn in?
Everybody is. There's only one member now who needs to take his ethics training.
Do you have any idea of what period of time from when they were appointed to when they got sworn in, they got sworn in?
I don't know, because, as I say, the last two members are Liz and myself. So I don't know the process.
May I? Yeah, go ahead. So Don, just looking at the, if I might look over your shoulder, Alan Peterson is not really participating from what I understand. He's missed quite
correct.
a few meetings. And I don't have that information in front of me. I apologize. I should have brought that. Something like, 4 out of the last 5 meetings he's missed. David Callahan was totally in support of it becoming a volunteer-based committee, not even a committee, but volunteers, a group of volunteers. Ron was also somebody who was absent quite a bit.
Which Ron is that?
There's only one Ron.
There's a Ron Rich and a Ron Sonia.
Sonia.
Ron Rich is not listed on our website at all. We've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 6 people listed on our current website. 1 Ron. So, just based on what people in the room were supporting, I still am going to say, make them volunteers under Amy's direction.
I guess the point I was making with all of this was something has to happen in any event because they haven't been holding legitimate meetings because of who was and who wasn't in attendance, whether they could get a quorum, whether everybody was sworn in. So the current state of affairs can't go on, so something has to occur.
Yeah.
That's why we're saying we have the next meeting to get to make a decision. Everybody either show up or the committee's disbanded, but you got to give us time to, same with any other committee.
Did you have more to say, Larry?
Yeah, I've had no contact with the committee, and so I don't have a bias that way. But my bias is, having been a liaison to the committee in past years, where it was in fact very active. And they did a lot more than just keep the trails clear. They looked at, how to prevent people from dumping things there, the kiosks that they put around. They worked with Harwich Conservation Commission to prepare the trails guide. And so they saw themselves as more than just cleaning the trails. Now, I take your point on that. I guess my only, I'm reluctant to support it at this point. I'd like to have a meeting and see, let me back up and be clear about it. I don't know whether the problem is with the committee structure per se, or whether we're in a transition where they need to get active again. Based on what they've done in the past. And that's where I'm struggling with. If the problem is the committee's not, the organization's wrong, then I'm all for it. If the problem is that, because I've always felt we've had too many committees, but this is one that's been very active. If the problem is getting their act together and doing what they were doing when I was more familiar with them, then that's a different, that's a different question and a different answer. So I would like to hold off and have them have at least one discussion to see where they're going.
Okay. Did you have something?
They haven't been able to meet a quorum. So right now, it is 9 they're supposed to have. We've got 6 listed, and of those 6, 2 don't come to meetings. So they need 5 to have a meeting. They don't have 5. So the problem is with the committee itself. It's not the lack of willingness of the members. The people who do show up, really willing to participate. So that's why Amy suggested, hey, you know what? Rather than not be able to hold a meeting every single month since June, let's just work under my direction and do what you do best. I'm still gonna, I'm gonna actually make a motion,
Okay, so-
Madam Chair, if I
So
could.
I just want to kind of summarize some of the reasons that, you know, we're at this point, which is to the point that we've had the discussion, you know, we do have multiple committees, you know, numerous committees. We've got difficulties with the quorum, you know, we've got issues in terms of absences and lack of minutes and lack of really meetings. And so this is exactly the reason that we're discussing this, because the inability to meet a quorum, to have absences, to not have sufficient number of members is the reason that we really have to look hard at all these committees that we have and what their function is. And the fact that we have, you know, the head of conservation who's very much supportive of having these people, you know, under her as volunteers doing the work that they like to do, I think is the reason we're having this discussion. So I just want to be clear about why we're having this discussion. And, you know, I understand the idea of having yet another attempt at having this conversation. However, if we don't have enough members,
They can't have a
we can't have a meeting and we can't come to a decision. So I don't really know how we get to your point and what you're requesting. I understand it. I understand your point too, Larry. But what do we do next month when there's not enough members and there's not enough?
Then you can have your way.
But, so I think we're prolonging. You know,
I
that's.
think, don't the members, the volunteers deserve a chance to speak at our next meeting to decide if this is in fact how they want to go?
However, I believe we just heard that there aren't sufficient members.
There should be. I don't understand how all of a sudden we don't.
Okay, so.
I don't.
Am I understanding this correctly?
And
then?
Janelle, you were supposed to work with us last week to reduce it from 7 voting members to 5.
Okay, so I'm gonna.
That was your statement.
At this point, I think that we've covered the topic and our discussion and what's on our agenda. We're not gonna get off topic.
Not off
We're gonna
topic.
stick to what is on our agenda. So go ahead, Janelle, if you'd like to make a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we disband the Trails Committee and allow it to become a group of volunteers working under the direction of Amy Usowski, Conservation Director.
Okay.
You can pick up Bells next. Thank you.
Excuse me.
For the purposes of the discussion, I'm going to second it.
Okay. Go ahead, don't.
There's a couple things going on. One is, Janelle does not have the authority to go into a meeting and then say, tomorrow, I'm going to change it down to 5. If it's a construct of the board.
Excuse me, if we could have this conversation, this is what we're talking about, and Dawn has the floor right now. Thank you.
So, is a total number? I'm actually, in the fact that not everybody was sworn in, and the process of actually holding an open meeting is a little shaky. Going back to what Larry said, because as I said, I was on the board that created this thing, and originally the concept of it was there are a lot of trails out there, some of which are on town's conservation lands, which begs the question about jurisdictional conflicts, because you've got a conservation commission and a conservation agent and another committee that's supposedly in control of trails that are within a piece of property that the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction over, which makes my head want to burst just saying it. Then there's this secondary problem, which is originally they were just there to identify trails because there's a wealth of ancient ways that go through people's property. And there were people back then that were putting boulders up oppositionally so that they could cut off what historically was a trail and was a way, like an ancient way. But the public had the right to cut through people's property because it was an ancient way and it was part of the title to it. Somewhere along the line, it just kept getting more aggressive as to what it was to be doing. I'm not sure, I was gone by then, but originally the idea was we're going to tag the trails. This is a trail, we're going to identify them, we're going to put signs on them, we're going to try to get the public to understand what they could and couldn't walk on. Doing nothing at this point, as I said before, isn't necessarily an option. Whether or not that means pulling the plug on the committee tonight, or whether everybody feels comfortable with that, I don't know until we vote. But the question is, we can't do absolutely nothing. There's a whole bunch of things that are wrong that have to be fixed, including even re-examining what the chart charge is, to keep it, focused on what it is we want it to be, as opposed to what it's become.
Okay. Larry?
I think I've said,
Okay.
I can
Nothing
prolong
else?
it, but
Okay.
don't need to.
So do you want to take a vote?
If anybody would like me to read the charge, I will. I've got it right here.
It had to have been amended.
If not, I'm ready to vote.
Does anyone want the charge
No.
read?
Yeah,
You like it?
Okay,
Okay,
no.
so the background. Harwich is a community where residents and visitors alike enjoy a vast array of natural recreational opportunities. Along with its beaches and bike trail, Harwich has a network of trails which can potentially be enjoyed by many bicyclists and hikers. Purpose. The Trail Committee shall assist the public in enjoying our walking trails by working to mark or otherwise post such existing trails on public properties including conservation, forest, and open space parcels. Additionally, the committee shall be charged with encouraging the passive recreational use of such trails and recommending, for review by the authority with land jurisdiction, rules and regulations to protect public safety and natural resource values. The committee makeup, which is different than what we have, says it should be composed of 5 members, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that's what Dawn basically said just a minute ago is what the charge is.
I'm not going senile.
No, you're not going senile. So,
Okay. So, you want to take a vote on Janelle's motion?
You have a motion and a second, so a vote is
Right,
timely.
Yeah, we don't have a choice.
okay. So I think we need to take the vote well, we have to take the vote. So, you've seconded it, so I support it as well, because I don't really know how we get to having the committee meet again, have a quorum, when we haven't been able to achieve that thus far. So,
Madam Chair, just procedurally, I think what you want to do is just all in favor of the motion, and then all opposed to the motion, and then you can
all in
I
favor of the
know
motion?
it's the first, so I'm happy to help.
Okay.
all in favor, right?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed.
3 to 1.
Thank you, Chris.
I'd just like to say something.
Excuse me, this is not a public comment.
I would like to say something. Can I do that?
No,
Fine.
we've actually taken the vote and
I don't,
we're
I
moving
know,
on.
I understand that.
The town administrator's report is next on our agenda.
May I just speak a parting comment?
Public comment is done, we have to follow the agenda.
You wonder why your volunteers leave.
Okay, thank you. So, go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under Town Administrator's report tonight, I have several items. The first one is the status report on Cold Brook and the survey design work on Pleasant Bay South watershed collection design. Some of these updates are going to be fairly minor in nature, to be honest, but on the Cold Brook, we are still in discussions with HCT. They have folks that work for the state and other consultants that are looking at how to configure that for the environmental considerations, and we have our consultants that are looking at it from the standpoint of not only environmental considerations, but how do we obtain nitrogen attenuation in the system. So they've been trying to get together to have those discussions, and they are still in process in terms of those. So I don't have a more definitive at this point. And really, the only question is that we know marshland removes nitrogen, we know ponds remove nitrogen, and we're just trying to figure out what's the ratio that makes the most sense at that location. I did have an opportunity to talk to Dave Young, our consultant for the Pleasant Bay South. As folks are aware, we do have survey crews out and doing survey work. That survey work is still underway. The intent is, once that survey work is complete and a initial concept is put together, we will be doing a public meeting with folks that are in the affected area to have a discussion. So we are looking for having that meeting at the end of November or early December, so we'll do an information meeting. So we are making progress, and we're getting to that point. In terms of the Dennis Harwich Yarmouth Community Partnership.
Can I ask before you leave this topic, what is a internal project quality management session?
What are you, you're looking at?
I'm looking at CDM Smith's activities during the reporting period. They conducted an internal project quality management session. I just.
Sounds important.
I think that we meet to kind of.
I'm sure it is. I just was.
I believe what they're going through is that we meet internally to kind of go through to make sure that what we're doing meets the needs of the project.
So you have a list of milestones or objectives that you're comparing to and updating
So we
that?
have coordination meetings every so often to make sure that we're up to date. And if there's answers that the town needs, he's going to point those out, and then we need to make sure we get that information back.
Is that documented then, the results of this session?
I don't think the results of that session, but if there's action items that come out of that that require board information, absolutely, those will be brought back to the board.
Okay, so that you would feed back to us as you go forward. Okay, sorry.
You had me a little off, I didn't have that right up there, so. On the Dennis, Harwich, and Yarmouth Community Partnership wastewater option, I think that we had alluded to this at the last, I think Larry did an outstanding job doing a summary of our last meeting. One of the things that will come out of that is that we'll actually have legislation that the three towns will be putting together to just formalize and say that the three towns are all authorized to continue to meet to form a regional entity to do wastewater. So just as I think that will be the next step, that you'll see that as a warrant article item. We do have a meeting that's set up, actually I just got notice this afternoon, with the commissioner to kind of talk about some of the items that the commissioner had, that if we don't continue to make progress, what would be the alternatives that people would have. So we are trying to arrange that. I think that's towards the tail end of November that we'll be going in to meet with the state. And I think it's important for the three towns to meet with the state and just make sure we stay in concert with them. And this meeting would be with the Commissioner Suberg in Boston. On the,
And I think, excuse me interrupting, but I think it's not only that we stay in concert, but that there's very visible public support from the state in our actions. Since people always look at where, you know, where the regulatory climate is and how they're moving, helping us out on that, so.
Well, and I think to that point, we want to be clear that we want to move in these directions where we're working on a regional basis, because there's benefits to us in the.
yeah, I think at the last meeting that we were at, we had like savings in the neighborhood of like 50% in terms of the construction of the plant and in terms of ongoing operations costs. So overall, because the pipes in the ground are still the pipes in the ground, so there's not much change in that. So I think our overall savings was about 19% if memory serves. But in those specific categories where we're going to have one facility as opposed to us operating our own and having our own staff, that's where the savings could be very significant. On the Saquatucket Harbor landside contract, the chairman had asked for information that when the board had voted to ask the Brown Lindquist people to do an update, there's costs associated with that in terms of doing the helical coils as opposed to the pilings. So I just provided that additional information. I think it was about $14,000 was the total additional element.
And I do believe they also waived some fees in here
They
as
did.
well.
They actually waived two primary fees. They had a 15% overhead, so they waived that, so they're not taking that. And then the other, they have put in a larger effort than what they had specifically. But to ask engineers to draw up specs for the helical coils, that's really kind of specific work, and that's what we're essentially paying those elements for. On the capital outlay plan summary, I did put in a few of the updates. Just on that, I think there's really three areas. that I'd like to kind of focus on. I have been asked by CPC to do a prioritization of the town requests. So one of the things that immediately kind of comes to mind is that, if you would, there's kind of 4 buckets that CPC expends out of. They have unreserved, and then also they tend to do recreation projects out of that, open space, housing, and then historic. And I don't think it makes sense to do a generic prioritization. So what I'll do is I'll do a category prioritization. So if there's $100 worth of requests and there's $100 worth of funding for historic, then the request would be to fund them all. In some of the categories where the requests exceed the amount of money, then I would make the recommendation to prioritize the town sections. There are 3 submissions that are not town, so most likely what I would do is kind of prioritize the town recommendations, but then also try to come up with a funding suggestion for what can we do to fund some of these efforts, and recognize that the committee has, I think they have $3.7 million in requests, and they only have $2.2 million worth of money. So there will have to be some prioritization, and that also means just in terms of potentially upcoming attractions. If I cannot get something funded through CPC, or do not believe that the votes will be there, I probably will wait till after they make their decision in December or early January, but that may necessitate that I look at other potential funding sources. Probably the big one on that is Hinckley's Pond. That Hinckley's Pond has been voted down twice. Last year I had made the recommendation that it be included in the construction dollars. So if there's insufficient funds to vote that project, then that may be a fallback plan that I have. I agree 100% that it should be funded by CPC, but I don't get a vote on CPC. So we'll have to see how that unfolds. Secondly,
before we skip past this entirely, I get that you don't have a vote, but this has been a matter of long-term concern for me. Before they started this round, as their liaison, I went in August and had a discussion about the fact that they lacked any discernible criteria for how they evaluate these things. So that last year they kind of utilized a de facto system that they seem to be making up along the way, where they were saying, if it's historic, you got to go to the historic district committee and get them to vote their support for this. And I made a specific reference to the fact that to them that the historic district committee really grew out of buildings. I mean, it had no particular expertise on historic documents, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggested that they have, they vote some sort of process and it be put on the internet so that everybody has a fair notice about what that process might be. Since we're on the consumer side of this, and we're advocating things, it's good to hear that they're talking about prioritizing and perhaps taking that to heart, that we find certain things more important than others. But my question is, as a submitter, do you have a real clear idea of who it is that you need a vote from, and that there's something in writing that says that?
That's a great question. I'll answer that 2 ways. One, I know actually a few people have joined me. I did attend their needs assessment public hearing and expressed staff-wise, staff has put together all the needs, so we definitely did that. We have also, from a staff perspective, gone to historic. I think I testified, or I don't know if testified is the right word, but presented to historic for historic elements and got favorable votes on those elements that we were in the historic bucket. I also went to the Housing Authority to submit, again, not testimony, but just a presentation, and got a favorable vote towards the concept of what we were pursuing on the housing. And to your final point, I don't believe that they have committed their requirements in writing of what they're looking for. But we have unofficially or officially been trying to pursue and go to those areas where in the past they had indicated that we should seek input.
Go ahead, Don.
But that's because you happen to be in that area in the prior year and you discerned that that's what they were looking for. So as far as you know, there's nothing that you were handed that if you want to get this, you need to do that.
That's correct.
The other point that I would like to make, because at least we have a bully pulpit here, and it gets televised, is lest anyone forget it, it's not their money. It's a surcharge on the real estate taxes of every single homeowner here in the community. They're the caretakers of that. It's house money,
Right.
literally. So, I mean, I'd kind of like, looking around at Orleans and other towns, I kind of like more transparency in the process, because it just seemed really unseemly that the town was asking for money last year. And I was at a number of those meetings, and they weren't really particularly treated well, and yet the irony wasn't lost on me. The town's asking for money from its own taxpayers to be able to do something that they can't do within the tax structure. And frankly, I didn't think we were treated all that well, but I couldn't find anything that said anything about what the rules really were.
I think that's a valid concern. I think, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'm gonna say no, I'm not gonna say it's invalid, it's a valid concern. And I agree with it, I'd wanna be careful that the objectives are not too black and white. Because as the committee members, and sometimes the thinking, I don't know if it changes over time, but there's maybe broadening the concepts. For some years, in the past, the CPC has been very much against doing any water structure repair, even though you can relate that to recreation, for instance. Whereas the interpretation of the rules basically is that you can, and other towns have. On the Outer Cape, they've used some of that CPC for that type of thing. Same way thing applies to Hinkley Pond. There's been some thought against that. Other towns have jumped on that. So I think we need broad objectives. I think the key is transparency, so people know what's going on, and some guidelines. I think I'd rather call them guidelines than black and white objectives for that reason.
Just to be clear about what I was saying, it's not about black and white. It's a matter about the absence of any sort of criteria that was articulated. And it's ironic that they were using our town committees as the front for them.
So
That you can't get a positive
same,
vote from us unless you get a positive vote
Yeah.
from this other committee that we appointed.
So it appears that we're almost in the same, we're not that far apart. They need guidelines and then move ahead.
Well, and that's the part I'm
I agree
saying
with
is a
that.
valid concern, because this, as Don raises the point of where the money's coming from,
Yeah.
it's the taxpayers' money. And when the town is going to the group to say, this would benefit the taxpayers,
Yeah.
then we should be having a discussion as to why it isn't.
That's an obvious sort.
I just want to know what the rules of the game are.
Janelle, do you have anything?
I'm just listening.
So just in terms of the capital outlay plan for upcoming attractions, I know the capital outlay committee has several meetings in November. Their anticipation is their vote will be, I think, December 5th is the vote. One of the things that now we have free cash, I will talk more about that at the next meeting. We'll put the material in there. So we do have a free cash number. I think a very favorable free cash number, which is good. And I will do a overview as to how I would recommend that we allocate that. And then really I will overall, and I think what I want to do is try to match up my funding recommendation with the prioritization. That really the role of the capital outlay committee is to establish what are the highest priorities and then to try to fund those highest priorities. So we will go through and do that. I do feel a little bit for CPC that, they have more requests than they have money. So there has to be some paring down.
Sure.
So that part, and I'm happy to provide some assistance. And one of the things too, just on that, and I will shut up, but you know, these aren't my initiatives. These are selectmen's initiatives, these are the town's initiatives, and sometimes I think that there's an element where they think it's a individual's concern. And, you know, there's very little that I do that is directly related to me. I mean, I try very hard in my position to understand what the needs and wants of the board are, what the needs and wants of the community are in terms of different obligations, and to see how we create a funding plan and identify funding to meet that. And I have said this in the past, the Hinckley's Pond, for instance, you know, we're not looking at taking $200 million and trying to access their money to fund 50 million of it. What we've done is been very careful to say there are elements that other towns have done that are valid uses of CPC funds, and really it's Hinckley's Pond and Seymour's Pond are the only two in my mind that match up with the comprehensive wastewater management plan with the funding source that's CPC. So that has been articulated to them, that we're not trying to get sewers funded and all that nature. So we are being very sensitive, or administration tries to be very sensitive to those concerns. And then I just, one other one I didn't have on here, and then if there are any questions on the weekly report, I'll happy to try to field those, but actually two more. I did have a chance to meet with the surveyor and the superintendent on the cultural center to look and see. The superintendent was pretty clear what the elementary school uses that back field, and what section would be used by the Little League and continue to be used by the Little League. So we will be doing some drawings to come back and kind of show the board, at least suggestions to the board as to what makes sense from a perspective. One of the things that we're having looked at is where the septic system is. So we'll have school use, town use, and then I think we need to do kind of common area. So the driveway services the driveway for both in terms of pickup, and obviously the septic system or the sewer system that's over there is used by both facilities. So we're trying to come back with a plan that will show town use, school use, and then common use or mutual use. So we hopefully will have that and bring that back for board consideration. I did give the superintendent a heads up that discussion, you know, would occur. I think he's kind of amenable to finishing what we had just talked about 3.5 years ago, so. And that concludes, one last one on the budget warrant timeline, just as a note. I think I had alluded to at the last meeting that we actually had the hearing on, or the budget review on Saturday. That was before the budget was actually presented to the board.
I like it.
So we did move that, and when you get into school vacation week, it actually moved to Saturday, March 3rd is the new date, which I think is pretty close to the date we did it last year. So I just, as a highlight on the budget warrant timeline, that change has been made. And that obviously would be a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and would be televised for the residents. And that concludes my comments this evening, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I just have one question, if I may. Yeah, go ahead. About the Little League fields. Was any determination made about whose property that is? You know, is it town?
I think the recommendation is that the agreement, as I read it, says that the school, when they declare that the middle school was no longer needed, they turned it over to the Board of Selectmen, to the town. And in that, we did put together a draft plan with a line, but it was never decided. So I think from a legal perspective, it was school property that they were turning over to the town, and we just need to find where that dividing line is. So it was school property originally that they turned back to the town, which was permissible by the agreement. And I think initially, we had the 10-foot around the periphery of the backside of the facility. I think this plan that we're working on will be something that we can have more formally, what is town, what is school, and then we can have that as part of an agreement with the Monomoy Regional School District to clearly identify those boundary lines.
I'm in particular wondering though about the two baseball fields. As of right now, they are town. Because like, for instance, the Centio Baldwin Field in front of the Monomoy High School, I believe the town basically gave it to Harwich Chatham Little League and they maintain it. But the two fields at the cultural center, at this point, I think the town is still maintaining.
Yeah, it's
right?
kind of apples and oranges.
So okay.
Because the Baldwin Field had a specific element where the town leased that facility to Little League.
Okay.
And in this case, I believe Little League has, or they received permission from Monomoy Regional School to do some work in that area.
Okay.
To build those fields. So
Okay.
they have, I don't know if it's an agreement or a lease, I don't want to mischaracterize it, but they got originally permission from Monomoy to do that. I think if I'm reading the board right, that we just want to clarify that we want the Little League to have those fields.
Yes.
And I think by doing this agreement and clarify, here's the boundary line, and then we could, the board could do a license agreement. Again, lease agreements need to go to town meeting and have 3-year limitations, but you could conceivably do a license agreement with the Little League and work out those conditions to have them continue to maintain, or what the town would do. In terms of, the town may want to consider, I did walk that area with the surveyor. You know, it's kind of a field in name only. I mean, it's really just grass with divots. And, you know, it may be something that, you know, we'd want to have recreation, potentially work with Little League to submit, I hate to say like a CPC application or something to kind of improve those fields. But I think it makes some sense that once the determination is the license agreement would be directly with the selectmen, that the plan of how to improve those fields needs to also be kind of worked out. So I think that, at least from my perspective, it's a little bit of an item in transition, and we're trying to make that transition a little cleaner.
Thank you.
I think that is important too, moving forward, because historically, this is where stuff gets lost in the shuffle, and 20, 30 years from now, and trying to decipher what's what. So I think we really need to look at the fact that we really need an existing conditions plan for what is now ours, what is now the town's, and has been turned back over, you know, so that we have some sort of record of what we're saying belongs to the town.
I absolutely agree, and I'm all in for the idea that, you know, this is at its very base, a jurisdictional issue, like who owns what. And what I am a little concerned about, I just want to put it out there, even more than what Janelle said, is that I don't like the idea of parsing who you represent, because, I mean, I'm a parent, but I'm a citizen. I mean, and I know MCLP has been caught in the jurisdictional crosshairs in the past 3 or 4 years. The Monomoy Cooperative Learning Program, for those people that don't know what it is. Essentially, it's not really the school system. It's a 501c3 that operates within the school system, but they're the kids who are our kids in the community. They were finding themselves not able to even get on one of those fields because they were getting caught between us having this tug of war about who owns that. We have the right to do it, is the school has the right? And I kind of don't want everybody to forget that the idea is here that this is to service the community, and as we move forward, there's got to be room for the Little League, there should be room for MCLP, there should be room for everybody, ultimately, to the extent that you can program it that way. This isn't about, it's ours now and we can start charging everybody.
No, right, I think that's important, and I think the location where it is leads to, you know, some sort of, you know, priority of the location, in the sense that you're right next to the elementary school, and whatever you can do. And again, I'm just saying in general, I mean, what I think we need to do right now, though, is decipher what's what, and then that's the next phase, so. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I agree. We, in fact, I know I've heard some criticism that we haven't done this up till now, that should have been done when we did the original agreement.
Right.
But we had a lot of things going, a lot of moving pieces at the time,
Right.
Right,
and the decision was made to make that a little bit vague, but now it has to be settled.
yeah, right.
We can fix it.
Okay, selectmen's report. Don, you want to start?
I live a very boring life, nothing.
Janelle?
I would actually like to thank the previous Trails Committee publicly, because of course they did do a lot of work. And also, Chris, if we could maybe make a formal letter to all
Letter
of
of
these.
thanks to the committee members.
That's it for
I
now.
think that's a great idea.
Just to build on what Janelle's stated, I think since we've taken this action, it'd be good to, coming from Amy, of how exactly they're going to work with her. You know, what the plan is, how it's going to look.
Mhm.
So there's some comfort going forward that that need will still be met.
Mhm.
You know, more than just Amy will take it on, have it listed, you know, what she's going to do.
So maybe we should have Amy come back with sort of a,
Yeah, not an emergency, but sometime soon.
right, in the next.
And how it fits with her and, you know, getting it organized.
I do think to that end, you know, everything that you listed, and certainly with the charge, you know, Amy, you know, I'm sure can take that into account and make sure that she kind of includes that.
You can basically put that together and have her go through Amy.
I mean, the
And
nice
so-
thing is that
and
they,
Because there's, well, that's enough said. You could do that and make it.
I mean, the nice thing is they asked for some money in the budget, so we did do a line, $2,500. So, you know, doing some of those trail kiosks and doing some of the maps, I mean, certainly she can not just spend the money on chainsaw and cutting, but she can do different things, you know, each year at the suggestion of the volunteers, I think makes sense.
Just very quickly, I was invited and attended a meeting put together by the Orleans Pond Coalition from a vendor who was looking at a new way to handling phosphate removal from ponds.
Oh, yeah,
And it was the technique is to use what they obviously claim is the best thing since sliced bread, but it was creating very micro oxygen bubbles, basically a superoxygenation process to you know, clean up the lakes. And then there's a biological component, which for me didn't make a lot of scientific sense, but that, you know, there it is. But at the moment, they're just starting, so we didn't have a lot of information on what the potential costs would be. The Orleans Pond Coalition at the moment is considering spending some money and having doing a trial on to see if it actually works. A lot of questions, but you know, anything that would do it as well or better and cheaper, I'm for.
How do you achieve superoxygenation?
Well,
Did they tell you that?
Yeah, they have a patented gizmo that pushes oxygen through and creates these micro bubbles of oxygen. And they're less than 1/10 of a micron, so really small. And as you know, the smaller the size, the more surface area you get. So with the same volume of oxygen, they get a lot more interaction with the algae and, you know, the problems that you have with, you know, you get problems in ponds because you get too much algae, they decompose and they remove the oxygen. So you could do that, and that also helped decompose the organic layer in the bottom. And so it's basically a technique of, the example shown, if you blow air through your bathtub, you get bubbles coming to the top. And by and large, these are so small, they stay in suspension long enough to be able to interact with the organic matter and oxidize it. I know, sorry, long-winded discussion, but that's what they're looking at, and they've, but it's still trials. We'll keep track of it. Who knows?
And just to that end, you know, it'd be worthwhile at a future meeting, I think I had suggested this in one area about kind of housing and having like a housing summit. But I do think we had a project that the town had. We were going to buy a solar bee product up at the golf course, and we did not buy that project. We did not buy that piece of equipment. It was going to stir the water and create some of that, perhaps similar oxygenation. We did do something different where we changed the turnover of the water, and we added aeration into it. And we've now done that for more than a year, and we got very good results in some areas, like nitrogen, but we did get other results in other areas that weren't as favorable. And I think what we found, and Heinz is still here, but I think it may be an agenda item, it may be worth to have a discussion, was that by having the bubble system go on the bottom, we stirred up other things. And so we're kind of hoping to get a second year's worth of results to see.
Yeah. Hi, Heinz Proft again.
States.
Working with Sean Fernandez at the golf course and town administrator, we've included the Cranberry Pond, irrigation pond on hole 14 as one of our water sampling stations. And what's unique is we have water samples before they instituted some of these things and after. Now, granted, it's only 1 year after, so it's hard to say, well, we've solved it, but Chris is correct. Some things have gone down, some things have gone up. With aeration, similar to Skinnicket Pond, if you think of a pond that has, let's say the average depth is 20 feet, but you've got like a 25-foot gunk hole, you want to stay away from there because that's where everything's collected over the years. You don't want to bring that back to the surface. You want to bring the rest of the pond from about 20 feet back up to the surface and have that recharge. That's done mechanically with fountains, cranberry pond. The solar bee, as Chris described, it's like an auger, and it goes down maybe 10, 12 feet, brings it to the surface and down. There is one at Skinnicket Pond. It does work, but it's a function of scale. How big do you need or how many do you need for that size body of water? Skinnicket Pond is much larger than the Cranberry Valley 14 hole. They have 2 other water bodies on the course that they're going to also do some work on, but we're collecting samples there, and we're going to include them next year's sample as well.
Great.
We were anticipating bringing a report back once we had more definitive data.
Thank you, Heinz. Okay, I think that's it. So-
Move we adjourn.
Excuse me.
Second.
Sorry.
Third.
Thank you for that.